I understand that we are just about to go live on Facebook. It's setting up the webinar for Facebook Live. Any moment now. Aha. Let's see what's happening here. Ah, yes. Yes, we are actually live on Facebook. It looks that way. Yes, we're live on Facebook. So I'm just going to switch screens. Ah, now here we are. We're all in the same room now. I'm just going to close this. And I'd like to thank you, Candy. That's lovely.
Question from Arwin as well.
Yes, what is that?
So just saying that he could just see us. So I think just to say that viewers can just see the panelists, can't they? Is that right?
Yes, just the panelists. Yeah, that's how it's set.
Yeah, that's how.
Okay, everybody. So I'd like to say a huge welcome and thank you for coming along today to view this and to listen to our guest speakers. My name is Cheyne Towers, and myself and a group of like-minded friends have decided to set up a social media campaign under the name of the Light of the Animal Kingdom. Now, this has arisen out of a necessity in our opinion, and the necessity has been caused by humanity's continuous abuse of the natural world, of natural habitats, abuse of animals, and taking for granted the natural world, and considering that all forms of natural life are in some way a commodity to be used and consumed. And consequently, we've gotten ourselves into a right old mess around the world. We all know this. Now, because of the recent circumstances with the lockdown caused by the virus, humanity has been shut up in a very strong way. And because humanity's been hushed, we are now in a position where many people are starting to ask questions about how are we conducting ourselves? How have we been conducting ourselves in the world? What frameworks and structures have we just been taking for granted that are actually, now we come to look at them more clearly, utterly dysfunctional? And so, as a reaction to this, we decided to create this Facebook page. Largely, really, for this very simple reason, is that we believe that all life, all sentient life, at its core, there is a spirit incarnated into each particular form of animal. Everything living has a spiritual dimension to it. Now, this isn't a new concept, it's an ancient concept. All indigenous people have known this. They have lived their lives appropriately. They've conducted themselves based upon this knowing. And to a terrible degree, in contemporary society, in modern society, humanity has lost our connection with the spiritual sanctity of life, and in particular the animal kingdom. So as a counterbalance, as a reaction to this, the purpose of this Facebook campaign and social media campaign is to encourage, to introduce a dialogue, to create a forum through which people around the world who recognize this simple principle, this simple understanding that all life is sacred, that it gives us an opportunity to have a voice, to join together in mutual acknowledgement, to gain a momentum around the world where there are lots of efforts being made, wonderful efforts by many people who are seeking to assist with efforts to end the destruction of natural habitats, to preserve natural habitats and conserve them. The same with conservation efforts for the animal kingdom. Many people who are working towards finding solutions to the terrible problems with pollution in all its forms caused by humanity. And what we want to do is to introduce into the popular narrative a return to an understanding which is ancient and which is vital. We believe that all life is sacred. Now today, we have our guest speakers, and I want to say a huge thank you to all of you for participating in this launch event. And I would like to just introduce you just briefly by name, and then I'd like to provide you an opportunity to introduce yourselves just a little bit more in detail before we move to the main body of what we're going to be speaking about. So firstly, our first speakers are Elaine and Joe Duffy, who run Holly's Horse Haven in Ireland, which is an equine rescue charity.
Hi Cheyne, pleasure to be here with you.
Thank you.
Great. Yep.
Wonderful to see you both.
We're very honoured to be part of this, to be invited to come along. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Pippa Rodger, Pippa is the Global Director of Communications and Marketing for World Animal Protection International. So hello, Pippa.
Hi there. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here with you. And I just wanted to explain my backdrop, which is my daughter's bedroom, which I thought, oh dear, that's not so professional, but actually everyone thought it was the perfect setting. So we've got the animals in the background. So that's where I'm doing my talk from.
That's wonderful. And we have James Fearnley. James is an international authority on apiceuticals, which are medicines from the honeybee. And welcome, James.
Well, thank you, Cheyne. I think it's a marvelous event that you've organised, and yeah, it somehow kind of resonates with something deeply inside me. Although I've spent most of my time with scientists, in my heart there's always been this other stream that I'm trying to bring out, and I think you've provided an opportunity both for me to do that and potentially for others as well. So thank you.
You're most welcome. So I'm not going to speak anymore. You're not here to hear me speak. You're here to hear our speakers speak. So I'd like to hand over with great pleasure to Elaine and Joe, please. All yours.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Cheyne.
Hi,
everybody. As I said, it's such a pleasure to be here, to be invited to be part of this momentous occasion. My name, as Cheyne said, is Elaine, and this is my husband, Joe. I just want to say that we co-founded Holly's Horse Haven a number of years ago, probably 15 years ago, all in all, because we were a few years working or doing rescue before we realized that we were actually doing it, if that makes any sense to anybody. What happened was we got that phone call, you know, the phone call that you get, you know, where people would phone you up and say, I found a cat, or I've got a dog, or could you help out? It basically was, could you take a racehorse? Now it's quite a strange phone call to get, but on that evening it was, if you don't take this animal, we just are at our wits' end. We don't know what's going to happen. And these were lovely, kind people who wanted to step up and do something for this animal. So that was the main reason why we found ourselves saying yes, basically. We arranged for Holly, as we called her, and that's the reason why our charity ended up being called Holly's Horse Haven. So we arranged for her to be brought up to us here in a tiny little village in Omeath in County Louth in Ireland. And then things started taking their own direction or took a turn that we weren't prepared for. So
yeah, I remember whenever Holly come to us first, we were just expecting Holly on her own, but in fact, when she arrived, she actually had her two filly foals with her. One of them 2 years old, the other a year old, and it was just, we thought, because although we had a couple of horses of our own, we had no experience at all with thoroughbreds. So I thought, what are these going to be crazy, you know? But they arrived and we managed okay with them. And shortly after that, we were phoned about a donkey that was, he was actually tethered up on the hills here in Omeath, and could we go and check him out? So when we did, myself and one of the volunteers that were here at the time, we went to see what the story was, and we found, as we named him after Alfie, we found Alfie, and he was in awful condition. He had been tethered and right around, he went as far as he could on this piece of rope that he was tied with, and he had eaten everything down to the soil. And we took him in, and it turned out, called the vet, it turned out he had a bad cut, that head collar actually cut into his head, and he was in an awful mess. He also had pneumonia, and it was one of the daughters, I suppose, brought him back to life, giving him baby milk through a syringe. And it's just thinking about that now, it reminds me, a friend of mine once said to me, Joe, where there's life, there's hope, never give up. And that applies to both, you know, animals and humans, doesn't it?
Oh, it really does. So after that, word in Ireland, I'm sure, as in every other country, in small towns and villages, etc., when word goes out, word goes out. And it seemed to be, we often said to ourselves, is there some kind of animal ESP that goes on, that they get this word out to one another, that somebody is open and willing to help? Because it just happened like a tsunami. We got another phone call to say there was 11, or there was about 120 horses were in an awful state. Now, I mean, Joe to this day can hardly really talk about this situation, because he went to the actual rescue. I let him.
Yeah. There was we were called to a rescue. It was actually in Northern Ireland, because where we are situated, we're just on the border with Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland. We actually are in the south of Ireland, but we're only 2 miles from the Northern Ireland border. So we work both north and south. We went to, it was awful conditions. There were
hundreds.
There were
these buried.
There were dead horses laying around here and there. There were mares that had foaled, and both the mare and the foal had died. And I just thought, how can humans be so cruel to animals? And then I figured out, well, you know, should look at the way they're treating each other. So to a lot of them, what is an animal? It's an animal. It's what do we care about it, you know? But it was so, it was unbelievable, the condition they were in. So we ended up, we took 11 of them. That's all we could take at the time. And we took them home, and it turned out the 2 vets landed down that had actually been on the rescue too. And it turned out that the horses were all very seriously ill. And we had to quarantine the whole yard then for 3 months. I suppose it was a bit like the coronavirus, you would say. It actually was a bronchial infection too, and very smitten. Yeah, we actually could carry it to other horses on our clothes and, you know, on our footwear. So we had to be disinfectant and foot baths and
practice lockdown.
Overalls, you know, disposable overalls and all that. But we got through it, and they all recovered, and we homed them all. You know,
Yeah.
it was just amazing.
So at that time, the Celtic tiger had kind of taken its nosedive here in Ireland, and where people were extremely well off. It hit hard, and anybody that had horses found that they just couldn't. They just couldn't afford to have these animals. A lot of the people that we ever dealt with, it was never their fault. They just literally couldn't afford to have a horse anymore, and they just were at their wits' end. I mean, you talk about animals in desperation. We dealt on the phone with those people that were in desperation as well. People that were saying to me, if you don't take our horse, I don't know, I won't be responsible for what I'll do to myself. This is my beloved pet. I've had this pet for 5 years, 7 years, and they were absolutely devastated. So we had this, I can only say tsunami of horses arriving, and it was the most horrible situation where you just couldn't say no. So it ended up with, we had about 130 rescue horses for about 4 years, summer or winter for 4 years. Each time the horses would get well, we would get them better, we'd be nursing them. Some of them would have horrendous conditions, some of them would be very starved. It was very difficult, and when we did get them rehabilitated, we would then work on getting them handled and overcoming their fears and their insecurities, etc. And then hopefully trying whatever was able to be backed, to get them trained for backing and to get them out to a beautiful home where people would love them and look after them. And we used an adoption method because adoption was the best way we felt that we could keep an eye on what was going on and how they would be cared for. Most of the time, a lot of our horses came from very difficult circumstances through government bodies. So they would be where they would have had to be removed. So it was a situation where they wouldn't go back. Somebody just popped in there and said, do they go back to their families? 99.9% of the time they didn't. We would have had a few situations where we weren't necessarily a sanctuary, but we would have helped the person by giving them time, and we would have kept the horse here and looked after it. And when they did get themselves sorted out, maybe a move of home, maybe whatever, and wanted to come up, we did on quite a few occasions. We did give them their horse back again. But that was through a public situation, a private person coming. Most of the horses that were taken in from pounds and councils and government bodies, etc., would have been seized. And that was a situation where we found ourselves in a very difficult position because we couldn't even put these horses up and advertise them on our Facebook page. Now, this people will say, well, what's that got to do with it? We basically had these animals that we were caring for, and we couldn't advertise them for people to get homes because it was too difficult, it was too dangerous a situation. So really we were looking at word of mouth, and this is where we find out that there was another side to the spirituality and how you deal with these animals. It wasn't very long after that we thought, oh my God, can we deal with this? Can we deal with the stress of this? Wasn't it? It was just overwhelming, totally overwhelming. Our lives 24/7 were given over, ourselves and our children and some lovely volunteers who came along. But we did put it out there and we said we desperately need some sort of help to help us with this situation. And it was a couple of weeks later. It didn't happen the way we thought it was going to happen, let me tell you all. It happened. we could have been doing with the Euro Millions or something, but absolutely not. No. A guy just landed up the laneway and asked us, was there any possibility that we could help with a group of it's a community group of young adults with addictions. now you'll say, ooh, what's going on there?
Yeah, a lot of people would have turned around and said, oh, hang on now, I don't know if we want them sort of people around the place, you know. But our belief is everyone deserves a chance. So the guy, he came and he said, yeah, these lads, and was there any chance of them coming to help in some way? You know, just he needed something for them to do. So we thought, right, okay, we'll have a go at it and see. So the lads came and they started.
Well, actually, they arrived, didn't they?
Yeah.
And we had absolutely no experience whatsoever with dealing with people, with young people with addictions. And I remember thinking to myself, we were there and we said, what are we going to say to them? How are we going to handle this situation? And it always sticks in our minds, because they walked into, we had a stable barn with 11 horses in it. And they walked in, and we remember looking at them and we thought, you know, what are we going to say to them? So we looked at them, and what came to us, what we felt very strongly about was, look, it's as simple as this. We have no idea where you're coming from. We have absolutely no idea what you're going through, and we don't know where you're going to be going to from here. But if you look around you, there's 11 horses standing looking at you that get it. They know exactly where you're coming from. And all we will ever ask of you is that you treat them the way you'd like to be treated yourself. So we really, really didn't have any problem with the guys. But it was after that we noticed there seemed to be a very special bond that went on. A connection. Yeah. And we always thought it was like a really strong energy, a really strong healing energy. And as we watched what was going on, we realized that these were individuals who really didn't have the strength or the self-caring to really heal the way that they needed to heal. And what we noticed was they needed to step back from themselves and really just focus on caring for something else. So what really happened was that these really, really ill animals had taken a priority in their lives, where they were getting up in the morning and coming to us because they really found out that they cared about them. They really found out that there was a bond was going on with them. And as we watched this really developing with the guys, we realized that the only way that you could describe it was reciprocal therapy or reciprocal healing. We won't call it therapy because we are not therapists, and we won't, you know, we can't even go down that road. We were really learning from these animals. We weren't reading books and going to lectures. We hadn't time to even bless ourselves. We literally had no time to do anything. So these animals were really teaching us that, honestly, this is what it's about, isn't it?
Yeah. They just had a total connection with the horses, you know. Over the years, I suppose I've noticed it more, that every horse is different, and they all have a certain spirit within them, like a soul within them. And you can just connect with them, you know. And these lads were given to the horses, and in return, they were given back to them. It was, I suppose, a transfer of love, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, it was just unconditional love. That was it. That's the best way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just what God is all about, what Spirit is all about, unconditional love, you know. Yeah. And you could just see that happening before your eyes, you know.
So we had more and more young individuals coming. For example, we had a wonderful situation where we had a group came, and one young individual, young teenage girl, and she hadn't, it turned out, we didn't even know this. I mean, we just seem to live in this parallel world where these things happen, and it's like, oh, really? She had locked down. She hadn't spoken in a number of years, and they had been very concerned about her. She was with us a couple of days only, and she was doing some grooming and some caring, and she literally, it was her father landed down a couple of days later, and he came in and he was really upset, and we thought, is something wrong? But it turned out that he had gone into the kitchen that morning. She was making a cup of tea. He sat down at the table, and she didn't even turn around from the kettle. She literally said, can we stop at the shop on the way in, because Brandy loves carrots and we need to get carrots. Now, he literally told us that he backed out of the kitchen. He was afraid to turn around to get his wife to come in, and it was just, sit down, sit down, sit down. And said, well, what kind of carrots will we need? She said, it doesn't matter. Brandy likes any carrots. That man was beyond consoling. They had spoken to doctors, etc. That pony had reached out to her, had touched something so deep within her heart that she felt obliged to make sure that she was bringing carrots for Brandy. You know, I mean, it just was beyond crazy, you know. So many memories, so many situations where that has happened with us, where it's like it's been like a miracle. It's been, and you watch it happening and you watch it unfolding. But the other side with them was Joe has found himself with a lot of the animals very close up when they were seriously ill, you know. And
yeah, I was told some years ago that I had the gift of healing, and really I didn't really understand it, I suppose, or think much about it until I actually started working with the horses. And there was different times I turned and I went in and I put my hands on them and asked Spirit for healing and that, and could see it working. There was one instant where we had a mare that had she had foaled and she was hemorrhaging, and we phoned the vet, couldn't get the vet, and the next thing I got a phone call back to say that he was actually doing a cesarean section on a cow, and when he was finished he'd get to us as soon as possible. And I thought to myself, no, that we're not, it's going to be too long. So I went into the mare and I put my hands on her and I asked Spirit for healing for her, and I could actually see the blood slowing down, and it just slowed down to a tiny drop and stopped then. And a wee while later the vet landed and what's the problem? So I said to him, and he just looked at me and he says, well, she seems to be okay now, you know.
But only she was standing in that pool of blood, you would never have believed that this horse was literally dying in front of our eyes. And it was like, as Joe said, it was like not hearing it, but feeling her say to him, put your hands on me. Put your hands on my face. I need you to touch me. And she needed him to touch her so that she could release that energy to connect, make that connection happen. She needed that touch so that through their joint energy, she could heal. She between the both of them, they healed. And we saw it so many times where they would come in and it would be, no, this is a situation that they're not going to make it. And you would get that feeling. You would know, you feel it. It's like in your soul talks to you and says, fight for me. Fight for me. I want to be here. It's not It's not my time. Yet we have seen that and felt that emotion where they've said, I've had enough.
Yeah, to have to let go, you know, that it's time to go.
Let me go. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all we can say is we didn't plan to become a charity. We didn't plan to do rescue. We find ourselves on a very, very invigorating, amazing journey. We have met so many animals and homed them and loved them and cared for them and moved them on. And we have been asked on a number of occasions, how can you do it? How can you love them and bring them back to health and let them go? But you just wouldn't believe the fact that there were so many people we were dealing with that when an animal would come in, we nearly knew who they would be suitable for.
We can tell when the person comes. There is people who have come to us, and when they've gone, I've turned around and said to Elaine, no, they're not getting one.
And we have seen those people walk into the stable. It's incredible. Walk into the stable, and every single one of the horses' ears go back, and they all look, and it's like this tension takes over. And we look at one another, and we look at the person. We say, "Oh dear, I'm really, really sorry, but there's been a mix-up here, and I'm sorry. The horse you came to look at has been double booked, and we can't home it. We'll let you know if something comes in that's suitable." Needless to say, I'm sorry, but it's not going to happen. You know, so you have the positive side, and you have the fact that they have that energy that they can connect, and they can. And I know there's people have laughed and said, "Oh, for God's sake, you actually think that you can talk to animals?" It's not that you talk to animals. It's that your spirit feels their spirit. Your energy feels their energy. And they connect with you so strongly that they can tell you what they want or what they don't want.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
All animals, not just horses, all animals are a good judge of character. There's no doubt about it.
And we've always said, and it's very true, we've always believed it. I heard it somewhere, and I honestly don't know who it was that wrote it or who it was that said it, but I give credit to them. I'm sorry, I can't say who it was, but when animal and human are broken by life, by rescuing that animal, I too am rescued. And I think that's very kind.
Absolutely beautiful. That's a lovely way to for now to maybe pass on to Pippa. Thank you both. That was beautiful.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Most welcome. So Pippa, please go ahead.
Yes, thank you. That was very, very touching. So I'm Pippa. I'm the Global Director of Marketing and Communications at World Animal Protection. And we're a global animal welfare organisation. And we've been campaigning to end animal cruelty for over 50 years. But to bring our work to life, I thought I'd also tell you a story. And I'm going to talk about the story of one mother pig. And let's call her number X4297X, as she lives in an industrial production unit near Shanghai, and the pigs there have no names. Her world is a pen with a concrete slatted floor. It's a sow stall, and she'll spend the 16 weeks of her pregnancy confined in it. It's no larger than a fridge, so she can't turn around, and she'll be moved to a farrowing crate when her piglets are born. They'll be taken away from her within 4 weeks. The males will be castrated, and tooth clipping and tail docking is commonplace because the cramped and boring conditions lead to frustration and biting. But pigs are smart, curious, sociable animals. They're at least as intelligent as dogs, and recent research even shows they're as intelligent as a 3-year-old child. They like to play, they like to investigate their environment, they have strong instincts to forage and to nest. They are not unfeeling units of production, commodities for our benefit. And yet there are 770 million pigs farmed globally. That's as many pigs as live in the US and the EU combined. And when you expand that out to all farmed animals, there's over 70 billion farm animals on land, and 2/3 of those are reared in those industrial units like the one I just described. And while I know that everyone here will find this heartbreaking, it isn't even just about the pigs, it's about all of us, because the waste and the contamination coming out of the pig farm pollutes our planet. The high doses of copper and zinc fed to pigs accumulate in our soil. Pig manure releases nitrogen and phosphorus into the atmosphere, and pig waste is not chemically treated before it returns to rivers. And the use of antibiotics, which is rife across the whole industrial farming system, is contributing to antimicrobial resistance in animals and people, which the World Health Organization has identified as one of the top 10 threats to global health. And with increased population, the growth of middle classes, increased urbanization, we're demanding even more meat and even more animal products, which is putting more pigs and animals in these industrial farming systems, and means we're encroaching more onto wild habitats and extracting more animals from the wild. So it's not hard to see the impact this has on our animals, on our health, and on our planet. So my organisation, World Animal Protection, and what I'm passionate about is tackling the root causes of animal cruelty and suffering, so that we can make lasting and global change and take animals out of these inherently cruel systems for good. And Cheyne at the beginning mentioned the pandemic, and the exciting thing that I want to talk to you about is now that we have an unprecedented opportunity. I really feel like this is the time when we can stop this. And it's not even just about COVID, SARS, swine flu, avian flu. They all share a common source by confining animals to factory farms in conditions that act as hotbeds for disease, and through encroaching on wild animals and ripping them away from their natural habitats. It's not only morally and ethically wrong, but we're harming the planet on whose health we depend, and we're bringing the next pandemic ever closer. But the good news is that more and more people are waking up to the fundamental truth that animal welfare is our welfare, that our well-being, our lives, our souls are inextricably linked. And actually, if we mistreat animals, we ultimately mistreat ourselves and our planet. So we'll never have a greater opportunity to transform this, to speak out against the exploitation of animals, and to achieve real and lasting change. And the great news is this is already starting to happen. So in January, in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, China imposed a temporary nationwide ban on all wildlife trade, which we want to see a permanent ban. In February, they passed a law to ban the farming and trade of wild animals for food, promising stronger enforcement and to crack down on the illegal wildlife trade. And that law is permanent. They've also given the highest level of protections for pangolins. Pangolins are the world's most trafficked animal. But by giving them the highest level of protection, they're putting them on a par with their revered pandas. And also they've removed using the scales of pangolins from China's list of medicinal drugs. So this will have a huge impact. Public awareness of animal protection is soaring across the country, and consumers are turning away from eating wild animals as food. And some cities have also started to ban the eating of cats and dogs. So it's really, really good progress. We're also seeing this mirrored in Vietnam, which has clamped down on the wildlife markets and increased prosecution of wildlife traders. And I think we've probably all seen more and more people reconnect and re-engage with nature. I'm sure we've all seen the stories, those beautiful stories of the lockdown when dolphins returned to Venice, people in the cities hearing birdsong for the first time, and the view of the Himalayas as the pollution lifted in many cities in India, just helping create that reconnection of nature. So we're seeing momentum and we must build on it. The pause in the capitalist machine has given people time to pause, reflect, and to think. And together, and the reason I think we're all here today is so that we can fill that gap and fill that void and get a really important message across. And there is an urgency now like never before. So what can we do? Well, we can use the spotlight of COVID-19 to demand a permanent end to the global trade in wild animals. So that's the end of all trade in wild animals, legal and illegal. And wouldn't it be amazing if something so good could come out of a situation that's been so tragic? So I would urge you all to sign up to our petition calling on the G20 to end the trade forever. It's running across 14 countries and we'll be taking it to the G20 leaders in November. But there's also a number of other organisations and coalitions demanding that we stop the trade. So by signing up to them all, we can add our voice to them all and put the pressure on world leaders when they're really starting to feel the pressure to change. And like I said, the wildlife trade isn't just about the illegal trade, which often dominates the headlines, such as the trafficking of rhinos for their horns or elephant for their ivory. But it encompasses the legal trade. And as it's legal, it's almost more problematic because people think it's okay, but actually it's just as cruel and dangerous. So the legal trade includes the use of wild animals for entertainment, in tourism, as pets, products, food, or medicine. I've just watched our heartbreaking undercover footage that we're going to be releasing this week of baby elephants being forcibly removed from their tormented mothers, literally having their spirits crushed just so tourists can ride on them or watch elephant shows and you watch them for our entertainment. So this is happening just for our entertainment. And the cruel irony is that our research shows that people are taking part in these experiences actually because they love animals and they want a close interaction with a wild animal, and they're just not aware of the suffering that goes on behind the scenes. So we need to raise awareness of that suffering because they would never do it if they knew the truth. Another common misperception that it's fine to buy a wild animal like a tortoise or a parrot or a snake as a pet, because again, it's people that love animals and we give them the very best and care and attention that we can. But the truth is, no matter how much we love animals, the needs of wild animals can never be met in captivity. They can only be happy in their natural environment or in a well-run sanctuary as the next best thing when it's not possible to return them back to the wild. So really, it's our responsibility, all of us, to educate ourselves, our networks, our contacts, anyone we know, especially if we hear about anyone thinking of having an interaction with a wild animal, just to say no, to see them in the wild or in a verified sanctuary, or if those aren't possible, on TV. And when it comes to looking for a verified sanctuary, it's really a sanctuary where they don't let you have that direct interaction with a wild animal. So, for example, an elephant sanctuary, where they don't let you ride the elephant, they don't let you wash the elephant, they don't let you bathe the elephant. So it's where you just look at them from a distance. Then you know it's a safe and a verified sanctuary. A bit closer to home, when it comes to farm animals, there's also a lot we can do. And I want to reassure you that if you're not a vegan or a vegetarian, it doesn't mean you can't care for animals. And I know that some meat eaters feel conflicted, but it's easy to choose nowadays to choose the path of compassion. So you can choose to eat less meat. And when you do it, eat high welfare. Find out where your meat or your fish or your dairy is sourced from. Ask at the supermarket, ask at the butcher. Only by asking will we start to make people more aware of this. And where you can, buy products from animals that have had a good life. So in the UK, organic or free range is the best, or local butchers where you can go and ask if they've been sourced. But if you live in a part in the world where these options are not available, then actually we're seeing a huge momentum actually towards more and more people finding more plant-based alternatives, plant-based products, or actually asking for high welfare products and starting to make that happen. So we're seeing in Thailand, in Colombia, that these products are starting to become available. But more needs to be done. We all need to keep the pressure on, especially where the choice is limited. But again, we're starting to see a change, and we can all be fundamental to increasing that change. And more broadly, I think that we're all here today actually because we've all got such a vital role in getting this message out there to the world. Because we're all here because we inherently believe in the spiritual sanctity of animals. And I'm sure you have friends who are like-minded and agree with us and will also be advocates. But I'm sure that we all know others who could yet to make that leap. And we can still help them to become advocates for animals, because we can now help them make that connection. We can show them the direct connection between animal welfare and human health. We can show them the connection between animal welfare and climate change in our planet. And we need to find the arguments that work for them, that make it personal for them, and to make animal welfare relevant to their everyday lives. And of course, we can take the time to listen, to hear and listen to the animal kingdom speak to us in our dreams and in our meditation, so that together we can give animals a voice. We can give a voice to the voiceless. Because if we can, the benefits are so wonderful and so magnificent that we must all aspire to achieve them. And I'll never forget my visit to a bear sanctuary that we fund in Romania. And I saw a bear leaping joyfully into the water, literally bouncing with glee and splashing in this water, unshackled from his life in captivity. I'd seen donkeys who carried heavy loads day in, day out in countries like Ethiopia and across many parts of the world, who, when released from their load, they would roll onto their back, their legs in the air, as they just release that tension in their back, free at last from that pain. And I've seen food systems designed with animal welfare at their heart, where pigs have space to forage, where they can dig and be their natural self. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The light of the animal kingdom shines through each and every one of us, and together we can stand up and be their voice, and then just imagine together what we can achieve. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Pippa. That was absolutely wonderful, and very, very moving as well. So moving onward, I'd like to introduce now James Fearnley. James, over to you, my friend. You need to unmute yourself, please. Where are you?
Thank you very
There
much,
we are.
Cheyne. And thank you, Elaine and Joe and Pippa for two absolutely inspiring conversations about animals. Thank you. It's an amazing event, this, and it's an incredible sort of confluence of circumstances, isn't it? There's the grand alignment. It's midsummer solstice. It's the end, or is it the beginning of the Mayan calendar? The Mayan calendar is circular, so, and it's all, and also it's the 100th anniversary of the Essene Brotherhood. Who worked that one out? That was very smart that it should happen on this day 100 years later. Yes, it has been. It's been a real pleasure to follow the last two speakers, because I think there's one thing that probably unites all of us, and that none of us imagined probably that we would end up doing what we're doing. Something else has taken us there, and I think right from the get-go, you know, we're into the operation of another world, and it's that other world, and I think that we want to kind of speak about. We want to try and imagine. We want to encourage other people to see it as a way of understanding how to operate in this very perplexing world, particularly for young people that we find ourselves in. So I trained as a lawyer in the 60s, but I became a student revolutionary, and I thought everything was going to be very different. And in a way it has been different, but I spent most of my life actually involved with natural medicine. But I spent 30 years of my life looking at a remarkable product called propolis. It's produced by bees, and the bees collect propolis from trees and plants, and they use it to defend their hive against infection. Propolis is a Greek word. Aristotle defined it. It means before the city. It is literally the defender of the city. And working with universities around the world, we've looked at propolis in many different ways, published books, peer-reviewed papers, and at a time where medicine is in absolute crisis, we're exploring a substance that has the potential, that is antibiotic, antifungal, anti-inflammatory, and has many other properties. Of course, our culture is very used to using that kind of anti-word, and pharmaceutical medicine is all about anti this or anti that, whereas actually propolis is for something. It's about, propolis is effectively the bee's immune system. And it's wherever the bee finds itself in, whatever conditions, whatever the flora that the bee finds in itself, but it chooses the resin from those plants and trees to make its propolis. It takes it back to the hive, it mixes it with wax, it transforms those chemicals in the most incredible way into a way which turns the plant's immune system into the bee's immune system. So, yeah, we call the bee, the honeybee, a superorganism. That's the current fashionable and scientific name, and so it is. In a beehive, there's maybe 60 or 70,000 bees, but they all act as one. None of them are standing up and saying, "Look, I don't want to go out and forage today." Or I don't want to feed the pupa. They all act as one. There is something which informs those bees that to work in harmony in so many different ways. It is like our own body. You know, our heart and our lungs and our liver, they don't compete with each other, not that we know until we're ill, of course, but they all work in a superb harmony. And so it is with the bees, no hierarchy, and an organism in nature that does no harm. It's been a time that I've spent this 30 years. I say most of that time it has been spent with scientists. It's been looking for something that in a way mimics the pharmaceutical drug. But slowly there's been a realization that the honeybee has a deeper meaning and a deeper purpose than what it can do for us. And over the years, I've begun to realize that the honeybee is a spiritual being that is actually teaching and defending not just its own city, but it's defending the spiritual being of the human being in his evolution through the cosmos. Now, why do I think that? Well, if you go back and if you look at all religions, and I mean all religions in the world, have a special reverence for the honeybee. Now, religions have a special reverence for most animals, but you look at them all and find one. Why is it the honeybee? In 9th century BC, the female priestesses in the great temple at Artemis at Ephesus, the female priestesses were called Melissa, another name for a bee. The male priests were called Essene, king bee. Why? The process of initiation at Ephesus in the mystery school was to imitate, to follow, to learn from the purity and harmony of the honeybee. I could go into it a lot, but the honeybee the honeybee colony in a very real sense is a school of unselfishness, and in a certain sense, that's exactly what the honeybee is teaching us. In the 6th century BC, the Greek Anacreon said that the honeybee doth seem like a little deity. The honeybee doth seem like a little deity. And in a way, you know, when you study the spiritual significance of the honeybee and its presence all over the world, you can see that in a sense, somehow the evolution that the honeybee has been through leads it to a place where, in a sense, it's become almost a stepping stone to God. it has become it has become a kind of route towards human beings understanding themselves in a much deeper way. It's very interesting. In the early 20th century, the Sufi Gurdjieff, he went in search of a monastery he believed still to be in existence in northern Afghanistan. The monastery was called the Samoan Dark. And the Samoan Dark, literally translated, means the Brotherhood of the Bees. This monastery collected knowledge, they said, in the same way that the bees collect nectar. They would collect knowledge, they would bring it back to the monastery, and they would work on it, that knowledge together, turning it into the honey of pure knowledge for mankind. And the thought was that when mankind really needs that knowledge, then the monks will make it available into the world. I think, monks of the Samoan Dark, if you're still there, this would be a good time.
Yeah.
So, and I want to talk a bit about Rudolf Steiner. I don't know if anybody, Rudolf Steiner was the founder of anthroposophy. He was an Austrian philosopher and theosophist, and he had a great deal to say about bees. And in a way, it kind of resonates with much of what I've said. Now, the other name for anthroposophy was spiritual science, not spiritual hokey pokey. It's spiritual science, but it's a kind of new science. It's science which involves you yourself in the observation. And I think this is one of the key things that we have to bring into our understanding and to our understanding of our relationship with animals and all living things, whether they be plants, animals, or men. And this is what Rudolf Steiner said about the honeybee. He said, the honeybee provides a detour for human beings to take into their beings what is right and necessary. Whoever looks at a beehive should actually say with an exalted state of mind, make this detour by way of the beehive, and the entire cosmos can find its way into human beings and help to make them sound in mind and body. Now, Rudolf Steiner did a huge amount of work in agriculture and education and so on, and those are fine words, but he followed it up with a lot of research. That research has continued. So the point I wanted to make here is that yes, I've been involved with a lot of science, but behind that science and in the past, the bee has had a place in the world of man, and it has been spoken about for a very long time, but we have forgotten it. It's a little bit like the Sleeping Beauty, we've gone to sleep, and we've forgotten about this other story. We've forgotten about this other relationship. And over the last 100 years, the honeybee has, I would say, and I'm going to use this word, been mercilessly exploited for its products, for the things it does for us. And in 2013, 60% of all honeybees in the US died. But the problem is not about the US, the problem is a worldwide problem. And many of them died from a syndrome that we came to know as colony collapse disorder. So very interesting this. You have colonies of apparently healthy bees. They're full of food, they're full of brood, and they leave the hive and they don't come back. They don't know how to come back. It's almost as if the glue that holds them together, if you like, that superorganism again, that kind of spirit of the honeybee, that collective spirit of the honeybee has been broken down in its physical form so much that they simply disintegrate. And as individuals, they're nothing. They die. So it's as if something snaps. The communication cord with their higher, greater being breaks, and their physical reality disappears. Now, am I alone in thinking that actually we're suffering from a kind of community collapse disorder? That our sense of community with each other, our relatedness to each other is vanishing before our eyes, that our economic system has entered and now controls our social life, and it now controls our spiritual life. You know, as with the bee, we've turned God into a commodity. So we face a crisis on just about every level. Pippa has mentioned many of them, but in terms of physical health, problem with antibiotics is a major one that I work with. The problems of mounting mental illness, burgeoning mental illness. We've got a global economic system that's in chaos, and we've got a global environmental situation which is near to collapse. And then comes along COVID-19. As Pippa says, in the midst of all this crisis has come this pandemic, which has killed thousands, hundreds of thousands of people. It's decimated many national economies. It looks like community collapse disorder to me. And yet, out of that, nature is beginning to repair itself. We live in the middle of the North York Moors, and when lockdown began, we were down at the bottom of our property, and we saw for the very first time a deer running through our garden. You know, that story has been repeated. That story has been repeated many times. The oxygen levels are up, biodiversity is stronger. Something has managed to happen that we could not have conceived as coming from a political process. So the thing about disease, it's not always a bad thing. It's a challenge, isn't it? It's a challenge which can give us a new opportunity to do something. And the question is, will we take that opportunity? One thing's certain, that if we don't build this, for many, newfound awareness and relationship with nature and with the animal kingdom and with each other, we're not going to survive, I think, as humanity is not going to survive. We belong to nature, and we belong to the higher world. And I want to finish with two thoughts. One is taken from the Persian poet Rumi, talking about nature. He says, "I died as a mineral and became a plant. I died as a plant and rose to animal. I died as an animal and I was human. Why should I fear? When was I less by dying? Yet once more I shall die human, to soar with angels blessed above." It's not just the spirit, it's science. He's telling us how things work because he knew. And finally, I want to finish with something that I wrote myself for a festival celebration quite a long time ago, but somehow it seems appropriate for what we're talking about here. In particular, it seems appropriate to sort of resonate with that discussion of the journey that we're now on, taking which is taking place from our head back to our heart. So this is the hymn to the honeybee. How we have misunderstood you. Melissa, messenger of the light, master, the honeybee, companion of the Logos, the one remaining one, always a nursemaid to the human being, the detour round our divisions, back to oneness. Never have you doubted us, though we have doubted you. Throughout the whole of time, you were present in your priestly crown, present as a stepping stone for man, in Babylon, in ancient India, in Egypt, in the Samoan dark, in Greece at Ephesus with Artemis the guide, and Melissa, and the Essene as your priestess and priest. Come back this day into our true imagination, no longer just a metaphor for sweetness, but as companion to our metamorphosis. Have patience with our prayer as we once more honor you, asking your consent to be an ark which can guide us from these darkened times to a braver start, to a new awakening of the human heart.
Bless you, James. That was absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much. So much. So I'd like now to open up our discourse to a little bit of interactive discussion, because there were some wonderful threads of connection through the various themes. The honeybee's example of acting selflessly in service to a cause, and the joy of doing the work. And Elaine and Joe speaking about what it actually means to be unconditionally loving and to provide that service without condition, to be there in order to help. And Pippa about all of the different initiatives that are now taking place around the world, where people are actually doing the work. They are surrendering themselves in service to a cause and are acting practically to find solutions to the various problems, the many problems that are existing now. You are all examples of people who have, if you like, and are heeding a call that comes from your heart, and you are giving of yourselves, and the lives that you're living are lives which are being lived in service to love and goodness, and to be as best as possible an advocate to the animals, for the animals, to work on their behalf, to care for them, to protect them, and also to learn from them. And this is something I feel very strongly that came across in both what James spoke about then and also Elaine and Joe, is that through your efforts over all of the years of study and research and practical work, that you're in a position to communicate to people based on real world experience about what we can learn from animals. What can we learn from them? I mean, the ways in which animals communicate with each other in their various societies, the way they function. I mean, the example of the honeybee in the hive, and they all act as one. What a wonderful example that sets to all of us. So I would like to open this up for you to speak with each other. Please, go ahead.
Well, I think it was such a pleasure to listen to both yourself, Pippa, and yourself, James. It's incredible what's going on. You know, I mean, we're only a tiny dot in the middle of all of this. You know, I mean, to listen to all of the active help that's going on is so encouraging. And James, what we want to say to you is that you have no idea how many times honey has got us out of a really, really difficult hole. And we have used it for absolutely everything, simply because we couldn't afford drugs. We couldn't.
The healing properties of the honey is unbelievable.
Astonishing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and we've seen it take wounds that were unhealable, basically, to not a mark.
Yeah, not a mark, right.
Not a mark, not a scar, not anything. It is the most incredible gift, isn't it? It's a life gift. We've always seen it as a life gift, you know. It's amazing. Yeah.
I think in both the talks from Elaine and Joe and James, and Cheyne, you referenced it, was that point about learning from the animals, because I think that's just so powerful and important, because as humans we just think we know everything and we know how to treat them and we know what to do with them, and even, you know, in practical work we're like, we need to do this, we need to do that, but actually taking that step back and trying to tune in and listen, I think is incredible, because actually they can tell us so much more than, you know, we could even think of knowing. And yeah, and I think that is that would be such a precious gift for us to kind of, you know, share more and get people to do more, because I think if people could really tune in, no way would they be treating them like they are now, you know, around the world. And I think that's a very powerful message, so thank you both.
You're right. You're right, Pippa. It is that essence of listening, though, isn't it? It's been, in a way, the COVID-19 has given a lot of people the time and the space to listen. I mean, for myself, I sat at the bottom of the garden. We've got a little cabin at the bottom of the garden, and this year I swear I actually saw the blossom opening as I watched. I've never seen it happen before. And I'd never seen the birds in our relationship with what's happening. I've never quite seen it before. Plenty of people have told me what it's like, and I could tell them what it's like, but I've never experienced it. And in a way, that's been the real blessing, hasn't it, of what has happened. And it's how we kind of go on to, it's how we can together work together so that we can continue to have that space, you know. And for me we've got to, you know, one of the lessons we have to really learn from the honeybee is that we have to start learning to live together with each other and share our economy, our social life, and our spiritual life. You know, we're all so separate, aren't we? We're so separate, but we have to. I keep saying we have to. You can say we have to but you know, how's it going to happen? And things like this, I think. Well, we're doing our best. That's all we can do. Like you say, Elaine, we're just little droplets. But homeopathy, there's nothing there. There's nothing in homeopathy, and yet I'm absolutely convinced that it works. Somehow it grasps the essence of something, and if we can grasp the essence of something in ourselves, then we become the remedy. And we don't need to think, oh gosh, we've got to try and move these great big social political pieces around and do this and that. We just have to change ourselves to become the.
But you know, James, honestly, you know, you're saying about learning so much from animals, no matter what animal it is or no matter how it works, you know. But there's also that side to I know for many, many years we heard people talking about this subject of manifestation, and it was always like it was a way out there, and it was like some crazy thing, you know. But honestly and truthfully, you know, we have seen ourselves stand there and be so disillusioned because we just didn't know what to do with a particular animal that was very ill or very stressed or very upset. And it was an incredible thing that you're literally standing there, and the next thing, you know, a car arrives in the yard, and somebody steps out of the car. And on one occasion, it was an old man. He was about, I think he was 90. He said he was 90. And he said him and the wife had gone for a run, and something had made him call round. I mean, we never saw this man in our entire lives. And we looked at him, and I said to him, "Oh, right." And he said, "What's wrong with you?" And I said, "Oh, we have a horse here that has pneumonia, but she's crazy. She's so scared. She's crazy, and nobody can get into her. We don't know what to do. Even the vet can't get into her, and she's suffocating." And he just looked and he laughed, and he said, "Oh, go and get me a sack, and you go get me some straw, and have you got any eucalyptus? Anybody got any eucalyptus?" The only thing we had was Vic. And he literally took this, tied a big rope around it, poured the Vic all into it, poured it with boiling water, and opened the stable door slightly and threw it in underneath her at her feet. And we all stood and looked at him, and he said, "She'll feel a lot better in about 10 minutes. And you could see her smelling this vapor and totally relaxing. But not only that, but this Vic was calming her as well. These are things that we knew nothing about. And there's so many people have come into our world, stepped into our lives with so much knowledge. You know, like you with James with the bees, and even Pippa, you know, it's all about knowledge. Knowledge is power. And we have learned that over the years, haven't we?
There's so many people out there with different bits of information, you know.
And so much to share.
And if you know, if they share it, you know, well, there's someone else knows it now, and if they share it, you know, everybody, it'll get around. You know,
and we hope Cheyne.
On that note, I'd like to say something, please, Joe. You just said there about sharing knowledge. One of the things that we hope for the development of this Facebook page and the social media campaign really is to bring people together, to allow people to share information. We all know what awful things are taking place in the world. This particular emphasis isn't about that. This is about what can be done from now. What can we actually begin to do to make a difference? How can we conduct our lives in a better way? How can we learn more of what the animal kingdom have to teach us? How can we tune in more appropriately? How can we learn to develop our faculties of listening and our ability to perceive what it's possible to learn through our care for the animal kingdom? And I'd just like to put to you, if I may, there are a few questions that people have put. And I'd just like you to briefly, one at a time, give a brief, if you can, response to these following questions. So we have a question from Ian who says, "Beautiful. What can we collectively do to make the biggest difference?" Elaine and Joe, please.
Well, I would say do the best you can, you know, and you know, that's all any of us can do, is we can only do our best, and that's it, you know.
But I think a lot of people think that they have to be actively there, hands-on, involved. But listening to Pippa, you know, there and social media now, and yourself, Cheyne, there is so many things that we can do now to support those larger organisations that are trying to step out there and help. you know, and no matter how small it is, you know, clicking a button can be the difference in that pig's life. So please
Yeah.
click the buttons. Please help in whatever way you can, you know.
Thank you very much. Pippa.
Yeah, I mean, just to follow on from that point, actually, because a lot of the work we have done has been on convincing the travel industry to be responsible and, you know, to turn away from this cruel and animal entertainment. And actually, the reason we've had so much traction is exactly that. Just we've had thousands of people signing our petition, supporting us, spreading the word, writing to the travel companies, and it does make a difference. And so definitely get behind anything you see like that. I mentioned there's a lot of petitions out there now I think we've got a great chance to end the global wildlife trade. That would be just most phenomenal win. So let's all try and get behind that, because, you know, the world is listening now. So that's a really good opportunity. But I also do think, building what Cheyne was saying earlier, it's about us being the advocates and us all being a voice, and, you know, us all using our knowledge or finding out more or doing our research so that we can spread the word. Because only, I think, when we can get the message out there, but in a way that people understand. And that's why I was kind of thinking we need to shape our message so people understand it, and so it can connect with them. And if we can all be that advocate, then that is going to make a huge, huge difference.
Thank you, Pippa. That's wonderful. James, please.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all that. I think you have to take every opportunity, but I guess the strongest thought in my own mind is that as human beings, we have to accept that we have a unique being ourselves, and that when we come to try and understand what we can do, we have to ask that question of ourselves. We have to ask the question, and I think if we ask the question of the spiritual world, we'll get our answer. I mean, Joe and Elaine's life seems to be absolute a perfect illustration of that. You know, I mean, okay, you don't have the knowledge, you know, but something, you know, but because of that desire to find a solution, because of love, basically, something comes to you. But I think we also have to ask the question, and not necessarily think I've got to go down a certain route because that's the only way. The only way is to turn, you know, part of the way is to turn yourself into a unique instrument for change. I'm emphasizing that because I know the big emphasis goes on the other side, on the, you know, what can we do mechanistically, so to speak, to change things, and that's very, very important. But if it doesn't have a heart in it, it isn't going to set the engine going.
And again, you've mentioned something I feel is vitally important, which is really the driving motivation that has set this whole thing in motion for what we're doing today and setting up the social media campaign. It's arisen from the heart. All of you are doing what you're doing because of a motivation that comes from a feeling in your heart that drives you forward, that sustains you, nourishes you and strengthens you. I heard an interview on Radio 4 a week or two ago in the morning with Dr. Jane Goodall, who I have deep respect for. And she mentioned something right at the end of her talk, which really, really struck a chord with me, and I remember this very clearly, that this is not about trying to convince people of an argument. We shouldn't be even trying to attempt to convince people of an argument. What we need to do is to speak to people's hearts, so that then they begin to feel from the inside, the interior of themselves. And that then has an influence on the way they think, the way they act and react, and the choices that they make, and the way that they conduct themselves in the world, because it comes from a feeling from within. I believe there are many, many, many people around the world who understand this and have such a feeling. So many. So my hope is with this is that we can bring more of these people together in a spirit of unity and solidarity. People who accept that all life has a spiritual component to it and that we are just a part of a greater being spiritually. So there's another question I'd like to put to you, please. And again, just brief answers would be perfect if you could, please. Ian, we hear occasionally about animals having a collective soul. Can the panelists briefly elaborate on this? There's a tricky question there, Ian. Animals having a collective soul, if you like an oversoul, like the spirit of the beast, but the grand spirit of the beast, or of any animal.
And we have watched, what I would like to say is that it's an incredible experience to watch when we now can take, there's 13 horses in our stable block. And when we've most seen this happen is whenever we have one new animal in that is extremely ill, that animal is fighting for her or his life, and every single animal in the stable stops and hardly breathes.
Total silence.
Total and complete silence. And you can nearly feel the buzz of the energy of them all stopping and turning their ears out and focusing on that one animal that is really in danger. It is amazing. You know, so that to us is maybe what
we've witnessed that, you know.
Yeah.
It's probably the best way of putting it, And then I just like to say, every living thing on earth, everything on earth is a part of God, is a part of Spirit, because Spirit created everything. So every total living thing on earth is connected to Source. We are all connected spiritually. You know, we are all a piece of God. That's all I want to say.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful, Joe. I absolutely agree with you. That's why we're here. That's why we're doing this, because we all feel this. We all recognize this. It's a simple thing. It's like a no-brainer, you know. Very, very straightforward. For those who feel it and understand it, it's obvious. James, do bees have a greater soul?
Yeah, I mean, I'm just going to say just how I understand it without trying to explain it. But I think the animal world do have a group soul. They operate. I mean, the honeybee is a perfect example of that. You know it. But when you see a murmur of starlings, or, you know, a shoal of whales, or I mean, there it is. It's writ large, as opposed to human beings who have their own unique soul. The human beings or animals are not the same. That's not to undermine either of them, but human beings, and I think that's where the bees as a sort of stepping stone comes in. Human beings, they've been sat in the back seat of the car for a long time, but now they're actually in the front seat. They have the capacity to drive the car. And we've got to work it out quick, you know, because they have the capacity for our own evolution.
Yeah.
So the answer is, for me, is definitely yes, they do have a group soul. But
thank you, James. That's great. So here, Beverly, I understand the very reason that you're here, James, is because of Beverly. She met you years ago, so I want to thank Beverly for introducing James to us. Beverly's question, she says, James's talk was deeply profound and moving, but on a practical level, what can we do or should not do to help save the bees?
Well, I think we've got to do all the things that I'm assuming I'm going to answer that.
Yeah.
First, we've got to do all the things that we're doing that Pippa's describing. We've got to engage ourselves with all those actions and campaigns and things. But we've also got to look out for the bees in our own backyard. We've got to plant flowers and plant the things that the bees like. I don't know. I guess as much as anything, I think we have to try. We have to try and understand what the bees are, just as we have to try and understand that all animals. But we just have to. I keep saying we just have to. It's so difficult, isn't it? But we have to sort of try and put ourselves in the place of that other spiritual being, as Joe says. Try and put ourselves in their place, just as when we meet another human being who we might not get on with, we have to try and put ourselves in the place of them in order to bridge the gap, in order to make the arc. Yes, practical things we can do and we must do. But the other side of the work, the yin and the yang of it, so to speak, the other side is the inner work, to try and ask the question and work on it, and yeah.
Thank you, James. But by understanding, as you said, what the bees are, or we could extend that further to, by understanding what animals are, we then come to understand what we are on a far deeper level.
Sure, because like Rumi, like the reference to Rumi, I died to mineral and I became a plant. I died to plant and I became an animal. And we have, I don't want to get into creationism or anything, but we are all a part of that. We have all of that. We have all of those beings in us. We just happen to be, a different form and collection of them all.
Yes.
As Pippa said, if we don't look after the animals, we're not looking after ourselves, and that's a very real thing. And we don't get it. We just don't get it. But that's what we really do need to get. We need to care for others, as we would care for ourselves, as you were saying, Elaine and Joe.
It's really interesting, actually, as well. I was just reflecting on something that was said earlier about feeling it from the inside. And actually, I think, because actually I look at children's books and they're so animal focused. And I think as children, we instinctively know and we connect with animals and we somehow lose it along the way. But actually, a lot of the work we've done on the wild animal side and making people aware that actually it's not right to interact with a wild animal. You just need to rub away a little bit and they get it and they know deep down. And it does just take a little bit of kind of, clearing away the dust and people do really feel it. And I think that's such a good point about helping just people to reconnect with that and to re-feel that, because actually it's not very deep down. And it's just good to help a little bit to kind of just clear the fog and get people to remember that.
Thank you, Pippa. Elaine and Joe?
Well, I suppose really, James was saying, how can you help honeybees? And really what comes to mind is that really if people were more conscious about, like Pippa, getting behind some of your campaigns to really have really persuade the multinationals to be more compassionate in how they're working their products or how they're making their products and make them more sort of workable and usable. We've seen all of that, and just to say to people that like life is so precious, isn't it? It's so precious,
I think
Joe.
more, as James was saying, more, flowers that the bee, for the bees, more plants that they can use, and less sprays. The sprays are a big problem.
Massive.
I know one a friend of mine. He's passed since, but he used to keep bees, and he had asked the farmers in his area that they were spraying their crops, and he had asked them would they spray the crops late in the evening or very early in the morning before the bees would go to work. And I think they did. I think most of them, anyway, went with that.
Yeah.
So.
And I think too, just one thing, Sheena, I just want to say, and we only learned this because we lived it, and that is a lot of people don't really realize that a huge amount of charities, the larger charitable organizations that will donate to small charities or to people that are trying to help, they don't recognize animals. Really, they don't, like the national lotteries and things, they don't give grants to animal charities. And I just want to say with all the heart in the world that, if there's 2 tins on a table and one was for children being abused, I would put £1 in the one for children being abused. But what I really want people to understand is that sometimes you think that your 50 pence or your pound doesn't matter, it's not enough. But just remember, if 1 million people put £1 in, £1 million. So just don't ever think that your little contribution isn't enough. Every small contribution helps massively.
Thank you, both of you. So on this note, I think this would be an appropriate time to just round things off for this event. And I'd like to thank you all, the speakers today, for participating in this and sharing with everybody. I'd like to thank everybody who's requested the link to attend this event today. And I'd also like to thank everybody who is viewing this live on Facebook. And also to speak to anybody who will see this recording at any point in the future. And I'd like to ask you all directly that if the principle that we are unified in speaking to you all about, the fact that all life is sacred, that there is a spiritual dimension to all life. If this speaks to you directly, then please do consider sharing this video with your friends on your social media network. What we want to do is to bring people together, as many people as possible from around the world. We want this to become a forum through which people can share information, that they can inform people around the world about what's being done to make a difference, what can be done more so to make more of a difference, how can we help, how can we be a part of the solution to the various problems that humanity is facing and the natural world is facing. So please do share this information with all of your like-minded, extended families and friends. I do look forward as well to continuing to develop this work so that we will speak to you again in the near future, and that we'll arrange other similar such events. If people wish to contact us in order to share information, we welcome all of you. And you can contact us by email at info@lightoftheanimalkingdom.org. info@lightoftheanimalkingdom.org. And we will, Pippa as well, we will be sharing all the relevant information about the campaigns from World Animal Protection and all of the various other organisations that are working so hard to address the various issues. We'll do what we can to encourage people to sign petitions and share the petitions and so on and so forth. I want to thank you all once again, absolutely, from the depths of my heart. Thank you so much for being a part of this today. And I wish you all a lovely, lovely summer solstice Sunday evening. And yeah, love to all of you, and I look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thanks for having us. It's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Pippa. Thank you, Elaine and Joe. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.